Bhalotia. She's a nutritionist and her studio is called NutriHeal. Chandni Karnani, and with Saplings Dance Studio. Can we please have Mudita first?
Yeah. Hi everyone, good evening. I am Mudita Kajaria and I'm here on behalf of Breath Yoga Studio to talk about my brand. As the famous yogi once said, yoga is not a workout, it is rather a work in. And we at Breath Yoga very strongly believe in this. The brand was established more than 10 years ago, and till date, it continues to be a pioneer in the field of yoga in the city. Apart from the regular yoga classes that we hold at our studio, we are continuously trying to evolve and keep ourselves updated in the field. We have recently introduced new styles of yoga like yin yoga and started offering prenatal yoga as well. We are regularly organizing workshops with teachers from around the globe to offer nothing but the best to our students. And during these COVID times, we have moved towards the virtual platform, and it's been great for us. We've been able to reach out to a lot more people, and close to 100 participants are practicing with us daily from more than 7 countries. And we've got a lot of positive feedback onto how practicing yoga with us has helped them stay physically and mentally strong during these times. So that's what keeps us going. So thank you, Shefali, for the opportunity. Thank you, YFlow. So stay healthy, stay strong.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mudita. Can we now have Smriti Bhalotia? Smriti, are you there?
Hello. Am I audible?
Yeah, now you're audible.
Hello. So good evening, everyone. This is Smriti Bhalotia. I'm a clinical nutritionist. I'm the founder of NutriHeal. We help people to heal their body by making them understand the importance of having healthy, nutritious food and with a balanced diet. We work towards various kind of chronic diseases like thyroid, diabetes, PCOD, arthritis, cancer, and with just lifestyle changes and good eating habit, we try to heal everyone's body who is suffering from these chronic diseases. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Flo, for giving me the opportunity to introduce my brand. Thank you.
Thank you, Smriti. Can we now have Chandni Karnani? Chandni, just be a little loud so that we can hear you.
Yeah. Hi, this is Chandni Karnani here. And my studio is called Saplings, a creative studio for kids. So basically what we do is it's a music and movement and yoga studio for kids. And we deal with kids from 2 to 6 years old. So, you know, it's a very tentative age where we try and positively impact the lives of all children through joyful dance, programs and yoga stories and happy singing that instills confidence in the children and promotes learning, encourages social teamwork in them. So, as it said, that music enlifts the mood of every age group, and this is been happening since a lot of time. Music always changes the mood of people, and it makes us the mood very happy. So that is what is our main aim, that we want to have happy children. And you know, these are living messages that we send into the future. Like, all the children are living messages that we send into the future, and we want to give them that kind of an environment where we see them healthy and happy, and that's the message that we send into the future. So what we do exactly is, for children from 2 to 6 years old, we have music, movement and yoga classes. Then from toddlers to 6 years old, we do play dates for all kids. For 4 years and above, we have Kathak, Odissi, ballet and hip hop dance classes. And we do various workshops like the summer camps, Halloween workshops, Easter workshops. This is apart from our normal classes. We also have an annual show where we give all the children the opportunity to be on stage at this young age only, and it's called Bedazzled. Now, at Bedazzled, we also practice with kids with live music. You know, we have live musicians who play and we sing to their tunes. So it's a very happy and alive environment that we help the children to be in. And the parents are also very happy when they see their children on stage singing to live music. So it's said that kids go where there is excitement and they stay where there is love. And we provide them with that love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chandni. Right. I would now like to welcome our esteemed speakers and panelists for an informative and educative session on the most relevant and required topic in today's virtual world. So we have with us Mr. Sebastian Edesri. Sebastian, can I see you? I don't know if I can now.
He's there.
Yes, he is. Yes. He is the security and fraud investigation professional with 40 years of experience in security, investigation, digital forensic, and training. He is master trained from Interpol on technology crime investigations. Sebastian is a qualified aircraft maintenance engineer and has served the Indian Air Force for 20 years and the Central Bureau of Investigation, CBI, for 10 years. He is closely associated with safety and security of children in the digital world. He is currently working with Deloitte as the Director and Head of Security. We have here with us Dr. Karnika Seth. She is an internationally acclaimed cyber lawyer and expert on information technology laws, practicing in Supreme Court of India. She is an author, educator, policymaker, and women and child protectionist. Kanika was consulted by the UNICEF on laws and ways for combating child online abuse and also guidelines to ensure cyber safety for children virtually. Then we have with us here Ms. Nirali Bhatia, a cyber psychologist, psychotherapist, and a certified internet addiction therapist. She is also a TEDx speaker and the founder of Cyber BAAP, which stands for Cyberbullying, Awareness, Action, and Prevention. And finally, we have our moderator, Ms. Leena Kejriwal. She is the founder of Missing Link. She is a photographer and installation artist based in Mumbai and Calcutta. Since 2015, she has been working with single-minded focus to create meaningful and impactful programs for prevention of trafficking. She has received various awards and accolades, and she is our eminent moderator today. And of course, a past floor chairperson, Calcutta, and not to miss out on mentioning that she is my senior from school and ex-MGDL. Welcome all of you. And Leena here, I would now give to you to start.
Thank you, Shefali, for the amazing introductions. I think each one of us are very happy. One thing which you forgot to mention, I'm also the founder of the YFlow Kolkata chapter. In my year is when you all started.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm going to jump in straight to the topic because there's lots to say in this space and the whole agenda where I want to really speak to the young parents like yourself and the others in the YFlow. So I'm going to jump straight into questions. I'm going to ask each one of you relevant questions so that we can make this a Q&A and a very well-rounded discussion with each one of you and your expertise. Yeah. Okay. Taking you all into the boys' locker room incident. The infamous Instagram chat group where students from an elite South Delhi school exchanged photos and lewd comments about their female classmates. The age group, class 11 and 12 students of top schools of Delhi. What was exchanged? Photos of teenage girls without their consent with offensive comments. Many conversations showed members talking about sexually assaulting their classmates. The expose also showed screenshots where members of the boys' locker room threatened to leak nude photographs of the girls who reported them. So whatever has unfolded thereafter leads me to first ask my first question to Nirali. Nirali, this isn't the first time we are seeing this. And that we have seen that there's a rise of such incidences. So I would like to ask you, how and why are children engaging in such conversations online today?
Thank you so much, Waifu Kolkata, for bringing up this kind of a webinar and inviting me. So, Lena very rightly pointed out that why this is happening to the children. So let's understand how the screen works. The communication with the screen is not what the human mind is designed to interpret communication as. What we are talking to the screen is basically from our emotions, our feelings. We cannot see the other person, we can't see the body language, we can't hear their expressions, nothing. So it's the disinhibition effect of the screen that makes this communication either extremely toxic or over benign, where you indulge in oversharing. So now when these kids, see by natural growth instances also, kids in teenage are explorative. Sexuality exploring is at the peak at that point of time. Unfortunately, since the mode of communication has now become via screens, we don't talk, we text, it becomes very easy to express whatever thoughts you're getting. I'm not saying that children previously would not get these kind of thoughts, but today with the exposure to the content that they are consuming on internet, you take any series on internet, on Amazon or Netflix or any kind of content or any games online, they are extremely violent, foul language, abusive language. So the thought process itself has become far more toxic in terms of the content consumption. So that is one reason. Second is when interaction with screen, there is no fear of being judged. There is a free flow of exchange because of the disinhibition effect. So I can keep on texting what is in my mind. Without understanding, children are not understanding that what goes in cyberspace becomes permanent over there, and that's where it leads to this. So while growing up, in my growing years also, we did have these kind of girls groups and boys groups. We would also, of course, the toxicity or the extremity was very different because of our exposures, also because of our value systems, the way society also used to function. There are various aspects which have led to this, but yes, primarily this platform makes it very easy because they believe they can be anonymous. They believe that nobody is ever going to judge them on what they are expressing and what they are writing, and also they believe it's cool to do so. So there's also somewhere that kind of pressure, which does lead to a lot of children who are still contemplating and debating whether they should or whether they shouldn't express in these terms. So yes, these are a few reasons that are taking
any
us.
angle which you can give about, okay, you're talking about the freedom of the space, the anonymity, and whatever's coming in your mind you're putting, but what role could parents play here in this? I'm talking about in the way they are telling them how to treat
Correct.
it.
Yeah. So what's happening is this entire medium, this entire digital revolution is very new, and the speed at which it has come, each one of us has got very less time, and we all have jumped into this. Now, as a parent, usually when the child is growing, we teach them to talk, we teach them to walk, we teach basic rules of societal conduct, but we have not taught them the conduct that is required in digital spaces. We parents a lot of times very proudly say that my kid is so technically savvy, mujhe bhi nahi aata hai, but the kid knows it. But we forget that they may know only the technical aspect. They do not have the wisdom and the foresight to see what can go wrong. So it's a digital education, the cyber hygiene, that what is uncompromisable if you are allowing your children to enter cyberspaces. So that's one area where we have to change our parenting style. We first get educated, aware, and then pass on that knowledge to our children.
Karnika, the next question goes to you. Like we saw, like it starts with like how Nirali saying in a playful manner, in a happy manner, you making comments. But boys' locker room seriously showed that it has extreme, manifestation of a toxic culture and legal ramifications. There was a full case around it, and a lot of people got indicted. So, can you tell us the do's and don'ts, and what makes a conversation legal and what turns it into an illegal space, and what could be the, what is the fine line, and what kind of legal ramifications can children face if they cross over?
Yes, a very pertinent question here, Lina, because I feel that, as Nirali also mentioned, that the netiquette is something that they're not taught in school nor at home, and that becomes an issue. And when they're online, especially on social media, there are many times, they are aware of expression. They want to express themselves. And while we all have a fundamental right to express ourselves, we cross over the line when we start using abusive language, for instance, or we are not in control of our emotions, and we start defaming the other person, or making some remarks which are very, very, sort of converging into bullying, constituting bullying. That is when we are threatening them that we will spoil their image, or we will cause body harm, or we will start verbal abuse or sexual assault or a sexual abuse on them, forcing the girls to click selfies and send to the boy, or sharing a particular video, stealing her photographs by hacking and morphing the pictures and putting them on other sites which are pornographic, for instance, or engaging in acts like using malware to steal their even credit card information, for that matter. So damage to data, spoiling the entire data that may be on a gadget, just to take revenge because there is an estranged relationship. Earlier there was a good relationship, and then once it gets estranged. So these are the threats that we have seen a number of cases. I have witnessed in the last 20 years in practice.
What's the youngest age group of a case which you faced? Because we have parents out here.
Yes, there have been, students from schools or otherwise children right from the age of, when it came to Blue Whale, we've seen instances right from the age of 7 and 8 complain about things like that. And these instances of bullying rise particularly during 10 to 13 years of age or 14 years of age. And things like revenge pornography, sextortion, that is extortion of money, or for the purposes of sexual gratification, or harassment, being to cause harassment to the girl. Those cases exceed, I think normally from the age group of 13, 14 onwards to about 17, 18. That's for, as regards children. In adults, this can go on, even women have faced harassment online. But by and large, I've understood this from the various discussions or the cases that I've handled, that if we teach the children cyber safety tips, if we teach especially our girls that they are not supposed to share anything which is personal, neither their pictures nor videos with anyone, that will safeguard themselves from a lot of harm. And the moment they start facing bullying online on social media, or somebody stalking them, stalking is following, watching somebody's movements online with the intention of causing inconvenience or intimidation or some sort of fear, rising of a fear in the girl's mind. So stalking is another issue which the girls have faced. So is trolling. On social media, if they write something, the girls are being trolled for expression of opinion. You must have gone through the Shreya Singhal case, like that was a landmark judgment where girls started expressing their opinion about a particular topic and they were arrested. And that's how Section 66A in the IT Act got struck down. So fundamental right to free speech is fine, but the moment it starts being abused as an issue, the thin line is that we need to be very, very observant that somebody should not be bullying, the girl. Or if that matter, any gender, I would say it, because laws protect both genders. Yes. So particularly women and girls, because they are more often the victim of crime.
Thank you, Kanika. So I'm going to go back to, this very interesting, I was seeing the stand-up comedy the other day, and the stand-up comedian says the internet today is what smoking was 20 years back. And that line really stuck me. 20 years back, we all were smoking everywhere. Pregnant women were smoking, little children were taking in the father was smoking right next to them. There was smoke all around us if we went to restaurants. And everybody thought it was really cool. And what's happening with the internet today, with the way the broadband is now reaching, we work in remote Sundarbans. I actually have high speed internet in Sundarbans. I mean, what is remote anymore? There's nothing which is remote. So in this whole space where the whole world is so connected with the internet, and there is no, like you said, netiquette, basic, there is no knowledge given on how to traverse this new space. We have 3-year-olds, we have 3-year-olds on YouTube videos, 6-year-olds playing games, 10-year-olds in classes. We have had a very big incident of a Zoom session in a class, school class recently in Calcutta, where it was somebody came in and made obnoxious sounds and noises for whatever reason, the intentions, but it does leave a scar on children. So Sebastian, my next question goes to you. What are the important security concerns that every parent should be aware of while they're introducing their children to the net? And what are the recent trends which they especially should be mindful about?
Yeah, first of all, let me thank Lena for giving me an opportunity to come into this forum and present my views. Regarding security concerns that every parent should be aware of right at the moment when they are introducing their children. One is, on the net, data moves both ways. Like for example, like a two-way bridge. If I am able to bring data from any of the computers on the internet, same way, many a times without your own knowledge or consent, data moves from your computer also. Something gets installed. Your computer could subsequently become a storehouse of criminal activity unless you are extremely careful about. And the children may not be aware of understanding this. So while I'll be coming to some of the other important aspects later. So the first one is the data moves both ways. Number two, internet at very design level itself is insecure because it was insecure by design. So if I have to go to the origin of the internet, when internet started, like something like ARPANET, that was the time when Cold War era of US and USSR, and USSR had then developed a communication technology that could withstand nuclear attack. So that was using what you call, it's known as valves. So US got really threatened, and they knew that if USSR do a nuclear attack, the entire communication system of US is going to fail. And that's how the ARPANET started. They wanted a communication system which can somehow connect to the different parts of US at least. So at the time, the connectivity was the main aim and not the security. And because the foundation is that, even today, even after best of security tools, procedures, processes, your internet remain insecure. Okay. And the third thing is, internet has not created any criminals. The only thing is that it opened up a new and very easy to operate tools to facilitate their nefarious intentions. So while some of the parents think that I don't want to give my child a computer or internet, the only thing that may not be appropriate, what I want to say, but then it should be that they should facilitate that, but at the same time, they should know what are some of the security procedures that they should be following. So, and your child, as it's already been both the speakers have told earlier, you need to tell very, very early before introducing to the internet, never believe strangers on the net, whether it is on the net or off the net.
Any other particular points, like for when you are saying a child when is coming onto the net, any particular main go-tos which you would really specify on for parents, because we have young parents out here?
Yeah, can you just repeat that one question? I lost that last moment.
Talking about young parents here. So we do know, talking about not talking to strangers, which everybody is doing nowadays, though you will not physically go talk to strangers, but you start talking to strangers online. It's becoming more common online than it is offline.
I'll just share maybe one slide so that make that point very clear.
Right.
So we just mentioned about the security concerns. And one of the points that is that the jurisdictional issue, like many criminals, they may be very close by, there could be anywhere in the world. So for an investigation point of view, it is completely anonymity, and it may be very difficult to locate a criminal from where he is operating. And he need not to be at a crime scene for any such activity because he can do everything remotely. We mentioned about. Yeah, coming to the next your question.
Yeah.
The criminals, they operate on the net, and they could be on any network or website of any age or any sex.
Mhm.
And they're experts in grooming. So, and they're hunting for young and vulnerable children. So when I say all these points, many of the times the parents themselves post a lot of information about children on the net that could make your children vulnerable.
Yeah.
We have so many parents in India today. If they don't post at least 1 or 2 photos or videos on a daily basis, they won't get sleep. But we have countries like maybe some other countries like France, where it's a crime to post a children's photograph. Now, the thing is that by posting different information of children on the net, they themselves are making their children vulnerable, actually. They come to know where this child could be because many of the photos have the information about GPS location, where the child is, and then how can the child be tracked and trapped. So all these can be designed by a simple research methodologies, and they are able to approach the child. Say, for example, my child is studying in a particular school and the parent themselves is posting a particular photograph or information about that. So any criminal who is trying to track that child or trap that child, it becomes very easy. Now there could be a way between that school and his residence, which could be very well made use of, etc. So my advice to all young parents are that try to avoid giving any information about your children on the net. We'll come to the other aspects subsequently later.
Um, Lena,
Yeah.
I'd like to just mention one more thing, like Sebastian explained on security particularly. There's a lot of insecure Wi-Fi connections we are using today. So WPA2 or 3 are the most secure ones, more secure ones that one should use. The OS, the operating system, needs to be completely up to date, up to date in terms of patches. Any kind of antivirus, if you are using, or anti-spyware, that needs to be put in, because that's very important. Plus, children are using multiple passwords, and across different accounts, even video conference or LMS systems, the learning management systems given to them by schools. So they have to keep some password manager in an encrypted manner, safeguard all the passwords. That's very crucial. Apart from the fact that they're not supposed to talk to strangers, if they're trying to use any new service from the web, for example, in one case which I handled, a girl very innocently took up a service without reading the terms and conditions, and she wanted to put all her personal pictures in a web service. She didn't check mark the only my viewing option, and the whole photographs which were so private went viral. So if the kids are using specifically in today's times learning online, they have to be very mindful of what new services they are taking up. And if they are downloading any apps, they need to be genuine apps. They have to verify that as well before downloading any app or any sharing any link, whether it's on WhatsApp or any platform whatsoever. So the phishing attacks are happening at this point, and also criminals are trying to sexually harass girls by putting in certain information. There are online child trafficking rackets which are percolating, and especially on the dark web. So one has to be very careful of what sites we are visiting. That's very essential as well from security point of view.
Yes, thank you, Kanika. Like, these are very direct
Lina,
issues.
just a sec. So you mentioned that these are young parents. So there's only one point that I want to mention over here is that there are few, simple rules if young parents can follow. First is, yes, the child's access should be limited to one single device, which has a child monitoring, or it has a separate login for a child to log in. Then when they want to introduce a separate device or an email account they want to open for a child so he can or she can have their own internet space, use Google Family Link. It's an amazing software. It
Okay.
really helps you monitor and also decide what all things your child can download, cannot download, because no matter what, we can't expect children. We adults don't read terms and conditions. How do we ever check the ratings and reviews of apps? We don't. We can't expect children to do. They come home listening to their peers and they're immediately going to use it. But
Right.
if you have given them a handset which is linked to the Google Family account, you as a parent will immediately get a notification that this on this device this is being accessed. So it's a wonderful tool. All Android phones today have an inbuilt Google Family Link as an app which should be used. And yes, then there are other rules like, one device, keep it in a public space, no bedroom use, etc., etc. There's a lot, but these are essentials,
No, that's great.
non-compromising.
I think, Shifali, that's a great pointer for you, for all your parents, because that's the main intention, so that everybody goes back with some clear-cut agendas and ideas about how they can really keep their children safe, because all your children are online today with the classes, right? So I do hope all these insights are going to help you all, in the coming days. So going back to how children are online and the way they're consuming the internet and social media. So Missing actually works on the UN first piece on prevention against trafficking. And we use the power of innovation, education, and empowerment to prevent this. And we do this through a systematic school program. And we go into schools and we do an awareness program, which we give them insights into how can you get trafficked, how do you keep yourself, who are the kind of people who could be approaching you, and we really do a systematic understanding of the space of how to keep yourself safe. So we recently conducted this national anti-trafficking drive, which we went into Tier 2 and Tier 3 cities. Nirali, I remember you were telling me that most of your cases also come from, 90% of your case come from Tier 2, Tier 3 cities.
Yes.
You never
yes.
imagined that, right? So we actually went there and we went into 9 states of India and around 7,000 students. And we got to know, of course, the major consumptions are happening on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, of course, was there, and Snapchat. 67% said that they get friendship requests and 46% said they'll be accepted. Okay, they accept the friend request. 49% said that they get sexually explicit material or pornographic material while browsing the internet. 58% of those said that they close the site. 42% of boys and girls said we look at it. And even if we shut it primarily, we'll probably go back to it and look at it because they're curious. Only 17% said that they might have an idea that there might be a link between sexually explicit material, pornography, and sex trafficking. What was at the same time, we saw that 63% of those who watch pornography said that if they knew that there was a correlation between pornography and exploitation, then they would actually stop watching pornography. So Missing Link Trust is actually dedicatedly working on prevention, and we are doing research-based interventions so that we can come up with, good programs and even give insights to educationists and policymakers to see how we can create the shift in the education programs, or even add a program like I've had Mr. PM Nair tell all the time, and he's talking about anti-trafficking, how awareness is the key to prevention. And that's what we are doing. So talking about this whole thing about porn and how children are consuming porn, Nirali, the question actually goes back to you, because you're seeing about the relation about, because you get a lot of insights into how are children consuming porn and the psychological impact of pornography on children, and in relation with how parents should do something about it. Handle it.
So with this entire explosion of cyberspace and social media and the kind of content we're having, the kitty of pornography has really broadened. It's no longer left to visiting those specific porn sites, which technically are banned, but they are all accessible and available in our countries also. So I'll just give an example of a first case of a child that I had got, 11 years old kid. Now kids travel in school buses where of course there are older children also. So one of the child happened to show him, look at this, and that's how this child was exposed to a pornographic clip. when by the time the kid came to me, he was almost on the threshold of addiction. An 11-year-old, as young as that. And obviously, no parent can be a satellite parent, continuously watching and monitoring this. So, the point that I'm trying to make over here is that yes, when your children, irrespective of being in cyberspace or not, at some point of time in age, they will get exposed to this. Unfortunately, because of cyberspace, the age has reduced. So, yeah, what matters over here is that if you come to know that yes, your child is watching something like that or has been exposed to content like that, instead of panicking, instead of getting scared, the best thing you could do is sit with them and explain to them in an appropriate manner the right facts about sex. It eventually is all about sex, that is making it extremely interesting for children as well. Also, if it is very young children, then like security wise, you can have your firewall settings and all that within your home facility. It will not ever happen. So yes, a lot of people say that, you know, from one video we reach to the another video and all, but if you have your firewalls in place, if you have very stringent security systems in place, a lot of that can be avoided. Nevertheless, the best way to do is that we know by age of 10 and 11, the exposure increases. So that's the time you talk about sex education. You get them educated so they can differentiate the impact of pornographic content and the expectation of a rightful sexual relationship, which is what eventually the harm from pornography is more about.
Yeah, because like we were saying, the main reason why actually children become victims or vulnerable is because of their curiosity.
Yes.
And the curiosity is only kindled because of the lack of understanding of the space. And that's only happening because parents aren't talking about sex.
Yes.
And to children young enough who they don't think are old enough to know it, but they don't even know what they are actually facing.
Yes.
So that's a very
whole,
big gap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah, I think
yeah,
there's something
sure.
which I'd like to add also, Lina, that, you know, in a lot of parents ask, and also teachers and children, they want to know whether there is any law which protects us in India, you know, if somebody hacks into our account or what should we be doing, you know. So in number of workshops which we've also conducted for schools, you know, there is a NGO which we set up called FIRE, apart from my active litigation practice and, you know, corporate practice. We realize the children need this awareness a lot. So do the parents and teachers. And when we do these workshops, it's basically to tell them about the legal aspects also of the whole you know, issue, and specifically the POCSO Act, because you're talking about trafficking. I mentioned that because of that. POCSO gives the punishment of almost 3 years of you know, imprisonment and fine in case there is any sexual harassment, showing off any object to a girl, making a verbal you know, advance on a girl, or sending any kind of emails, watching the girl, following a girl. So that's something which is 3 years of imprisonment. And for pornography, 5 years, 7 years or more. You know, so creating any child pornography, and I want to emphasize, even watching, storing, browsing of the same is illegal in India. And a lot of nations across the world follow this law. And therefore, while adult pornography, watching and browsing may not be a legal offense, but child pornography, even watching, is a legal offense. You know, so that's a very, very important thing. Although I want to say that publishing and transmission of even adult pornography is banned in India. So it's up to 3 years of imprisonment and fine. So that's what we exactly tell, you know, the parents and schools and children as well. And for policy, specifically schools, you know, they need to have a clear-cut policy on what, just like home rules, what parameters are allowed, what conduct is allowed online, which I think, apart from the IT policy of the school, needs to also incorporate the conduct, the code of conduct on social media, the code of conduct on use of school LMS, and the general best practices for cybersecurity and safety. So these are very essential, and explaining the law, that's there. And often, you know, I have come across parents who will delete the evidence because they don't want the girl to be defamed, for example. Tomorrow she might lose her reputation in society. The family will lose its reputation if they file a criminal complaint against an accused boy. So I handled a case very recently where a girl staying in a hostel was sexually abused by and assaulted by another peer, from the same school. And their parent was running frantic because she was based in Delhi, going to another state, and complaining it to the school that school should take action. School didn't want to take action because they said, we don't want to get into this, our reputation will be at stake. It's between you families to decide. So ultimately sort of a understanding arrived. Although the police complaint was lodged, the case got settled after the boy gave an undertaking that he's given all the gadgets which had all these videos and data of the girl, and he gave a complete undertaking that he will not be publishing or posting or sharing with anybody any content, and he doesn't have that anymore. So these are real life cases, and parents have to be aware. They need to check the gadgets of their kids, no matter how much resistance they may get. I'm also a parent. I understand my, our children going through teenage, they feel they have a right to privacy, but we must tell them these things, and we want to avoid, prevent these kind of problems. There have been girls who've committed suicide, Lena. I know, we've read in the papers, there is increasing depression. And because of these problems, parents are helpless. They have no clue. So as Nirali also pointed out, we must use filters, we must use firewalls. And Sebastian also pointed out, we have to have the filters right in place. The parents can put it at a browser level also. They can put it on the Wi-Fi level also, at the router level. Then all the gadgets in the house will be protected. If we put it at the router level, then you don't even have to install softwares on every gadget. So that's
Great.
also
That's a great insight. Yeah, that's amazing. That's a good, Shefali must tell that to all the parents.
yeah.
There was this case which Nirali was mentioning with a 13-year-old, because I'm very keen on sharing
Yeah,
these
that's a grooming case.
grooming
Yes.
cases, because these are all young parents and their children are soon going to be 12, some are already 13. So they're talking about girls getting groomed online in their own rooms on their own laptops. And I believe
Yeah.
you're saying this girl actually didn't even have her own phone. She used her mother's phone.
Yeah.
So the parent is keeping all the checks and balances, but still it's happening. So I think an insight into such case would be very important.
Yes. So it's very, very common. See, like what Karnika said, that's an ideal scenario that yes, we want to check our children's phones and we want to make a case. But honestly, tell me, which parent or which child would want to get engaged into a legal matter? These are practical scenarios. I'm not anti-law or anything. I literally actually tell them that let's do it so we can stop those perpetrators from harassing somebody else. But practically no one wants to go through the legal system because of the issues in our country in terms of lag. So in this case also what had happened that yes, parents were very vigilant. They had very strict rules that no personal devices, this, that, but they are children. They are peers. They have peers and they are very smart. So the girl was having an Instagram account for a very long time, but she had it on her friend's mobile. And that's where she had got a friend request from a stranger, but that stranger had her picture on it, and he said that you're very beautiful, and she in her Instagram bio had written that she plans to join police IPS, and she also plans to become a model. So that's exactly the point the predator started talking about, that this picture is very amazing. Is it recent? We have an we have a requirement of a model for a photo shoot which is digital. You don't even have to come over here because it's locked down. And this is how this whole thing starts. They do their homeworks, they target these kids. So despite of not having a device, kids are still active. That is where I reiterate that the moment you feel your children are talking about these things is the time not to push it under covers, but sit with them and make an account. Educate them, because when you do it, you can tell them the right things. In this case, the predator actually was 31 years old, and he made her believe that he is in love with her. When I was counseling the girl, all she kept on saying, he made me feel nice. He made me feel that he cared, because he also used to take his education. take her education. He would help her that you want to revise this chapter, do. So they invest time. This happened over a period of about 2.5 weeks to 3 weeks, till the time he first asked for a picture, which was a very, very intimate picture. He started with like, can I just get close up of your lips? They are so beautiful. Then it went down to, can I get picture of your breasts? And that's how, after winning the trust, is where the girl started showing, till it went on to a level where it became a full-fledged cyber sex. And it continued for months, till one day, because she was using the home computer, which was accessed by her siblings also, her sibling happened to see in the deleted files, one file was left. So the girl was clearing all the history and everything using incognito mode, etc. But by chance, one file was left, and that's how they spoke to her, and she said that, yes, I have been doing because I love him. And that's where her older sister got in touch with us, that you need to talk to her. She believes it is love. So these are day-to-day cases, and these are kids from families like your and mine. So parents, let me burst that bubble that this can never happen to me or my child. This is internet. No one is safe over here until you're smart.
Sebastian, Sebastian, you said you want, because we're talking about how children are now getting groomed, it's becoming, you said there were certain key points which actually can tell you if your child is being groomed. Certain signals which tell you your child is being groomed. Remember, you were talking about those points. Sebastian, you want to share those, the grooming points?
Yeah, I just want to, let me go to that screen.
Right. Sebastian is very technical, the screen.
Yeah, are you able to see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay. See, the grooming part, as Shefali was saying, I think, yeah, this is the screen I wanted to show. Okay, so as Shefali was saying, the predators or criminals are so good, whether it is relating to sex or drug trafficking, or in fact anything. The children are what you call groomed not only for sex, it's a drug trafficking and different activities that can be done, even ISI links. So all these are there. So they're very good to reach to the child. They look for the child mainly from what is posted by parents or themselves. Like she was saying that she wants to become an IPS officer or a model. So they pick on such things that are available on the net. And when it comes to child sexual abuse stuff, they expose children to things inappropriate to their age. And based on the curiosity, children are normally wanting to see what it is and try and have a hand at it, etc. And they give a lot of care, gifts, etc. to the children. So the purpose of that is to make the children indebted and then subsequently make them do the things improper. So I can tell you one small incident. It was as early as 2007, probably one of the last cases that I handled in CBI. One child of around, I think, 6th grader or 7th grader in a school attempted suicide. Incidentally, she didn't know how to put a note, etc. properly. So nothing happened. The child fell down, actually. And because of the commotion, the peon nearby came and the peon understood what was the issue, then took the child to the principal's room, and along with the counselor, etc. This child was asked what was the issue. Then comes the bigger picture. What happened that this child's mother expired about 2 to 3 months ago, and she died of breast cancer. And the father was very, very loving and caring for this child. He used to leave the child in the school every day morning before going to the school. And before she reaches home in the afternoon, somewhere around 4 o'clock, she had engaged an ayah to keep the child, food, everything for the child. And she used to come, and the ayah used to leave around 6 o'clock. And father used to come between 6 to 8, maybe something like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, 7:30 at different times. And in order to ensure that he is able to connect with the child, he himself opened an account for her with the Facebook, and he used to sometimes regularly chat and go with the child. And it was during one of this chat, this child got an invitation saying a Didi from the same school where she was studying. And the Didi, like, like a very good care, help in doing her maths and things like that. And she also told, we both being from a similar background, that is like we have a history of our mothers having breast cancer. We should be regularly inspecting or doing a self-examination for this right from very early age, so that if something can be detected at very early stage and we can do a cure. And the child didn't know how to do that. So all these things happens over a period of about 2 to 3 weeks. And then the child was asked to switch on the webcam and then remove the upper clothes, and then how to check and see how to do a self examination. And all this continued. And then next day in the evening, an old person from the nearby household, he's coming and knocking at her door just after I left, and before her dad comes in. And he had a photograph of hers without upper clothes. And he tried to kiss her, and then she shouts, and then somehow she is able to go that day. But this person told while going that if you tell to anybody or even to your father, your father will be killed. Not she, your father will be killed. And she was afraid what to do, what not to do, and unable to study or concentrate on the studies, etc. And it was in this process she attempted suicide. So what I wanted to say was that parents in introducing children to the net, everything is fine, but then they should also be telling this, some sort of habit, like they should talk anything to their parents, like a friend.
Yeah.
Maybe that could be one of the best approach. What I have seen is a most successful model for parents. So, and tell them, like, any of these sort of warning signs are there from anyone who is a known or unknown guy, then it should be told to the parents or maybe a teacher or an adult they trust, so that before any major issue or major warning sign can be seen and accordingly acted upon.
Right.
Okay.
Thank you so much, Sebastian. We just quickly go on to, we have a question here which is very interesting, which I anyway was going to ask Karnika.
Yeah.
Karnika, this question which is acting directly for you: where does one go if one's family or friend has a victim of online scam or cybercrime? What is the next step one should do?
Yes, I was actually going to go on to that answer itself without even if this question was not there, because it's very important.
Yes.
So if there is a cyber crime, especially if it is sexual harassment cases, we have to notify, we have to inform the police.
Yes.
And that is not something which is optional, but it is mandatory. It's mandated by law in the POCSO Act. And section 1920, if you go through that, it has an important obligation that you must report it to the police. Right. Helplines are available. The National Helpline 112 is where we normally report these crimes. And on the cybercrime portal, which is the cybercrime.gov.in, that's the portal. Especially in today's times when you may not be, able to visit a local police station, you can, at the comfort of your home, it's possible to just report it online, cybercrime.gov.in, and you will instantly get a receipt for the, complaint that you have lodged, and an IO of the concerned police station will be calling you back for, beginning the investigation and FIR being registered. So it's a very important thing to share here. And also, NCPCR as a body has a POCSO button, e-POCSO button. So if any child goes through any kind of an incident, and he's reluctant to share with any parent or even the teacher, one needs to spread this word, because the e-POCSO button, even a child who doesn't, he's not able to read and write too much, even from I would say a rural background, if he knows about this e-POCSO, he can actually use that. It's just a button and one word which he needs to write, and the NCPCR gets back to the particular child, or the family. That's possible. So these are essential things, and the evidence which is there, one needs to really keep that intact. Shouldn't be deleted. And try and take screenshots of those, because those links may be just, especially on social media. I must warn you, as parents, you have to be cautious. The stories are only run for 10 to 12 hours or 24 hours. So what criminals are doing, they are deliberately just posting defamatory materials or threats on stories rather than main pages. So you need to click screenshots and, keep them handy for making these complaints. That's very essential also to share here.
And this whole agenda of parents want to keeping anonymity. Like, what would your advice be for that for them? Because everybody like wants to be anonymous about these complaints.
So if you're saying that they don't want to report,
No, they want to approach, but they don't. They're mainly scared about it becoming a splash and everyone's name.
as regards media, media is not supposed to reveal the real name of the
Not
victim. That is the mandate also by POCSO law.
Yes.
But often we see that in the FIR, the real name will be mentioned. I think Sebastian will agree with me on that.
Yes.
That the magistrate level, or if the complaint is going there, then the real name will be somewhere mentioned. Although we in those cases do in-camera proceedings. In-camera means that the court is not open court like you have hearings in other cases, but in chamber, in camera hearings, like in separate hearings only with that child and that family, with the judge hearing only them, so that nobody else hears what the case is about. So that kind of confidentiality is there, and there are child-friendly courts under POCSO law. Child-friendly courts which allow a child a very carefree room, and where the child's statements are taken, so that he doesn't get intimidated with the court process and the procedure. So
I want you to share this so that parents here realize that it's not so scary. It can be still done systematically.
Parents, what they see in movies is not what really is the reality, because movies just dramatize situations and they show things.
And any media who shares your name is actually they can be indicted in the court of law.
Absolutely.
So there's nobody can give out the names of any victims.
Yeah, yes. Especially for POCSO cases.
Especially for POCSO cases. That's
yes. So, but unfortunately, the POCSO conviction rate is very low in the country. I've seen only 2-3% being reported. And that's majorly also because although we have fast track courts, there are hearings, there are complaints, but there is large underreporting. So the actual figures may not be really what the NC, I would say the national board, which gives the, NCRB data, may not be really true, as in the real statistics. You will agree with me, Leena, that there are far many more cases than are being reported.
Far more. Trafficking cases are a laugh in India, the NCRB.
Absolutely.
So we have a very interesting question here also. There have been cases of subliminal messages promoting and teaching self-harm in YouTube videos meant for children. How do we protect our children from such content?
Very pertinent. We must immediately inform the social media, the portal. And I have myself, we have sent legal notices to the social media platforms when the parents have approached us in certain cases where they have seen self-harm videos, especially during Blue Whale. And there are many online gaming apps even now which are promoting violence, and children enjoy that thinking it's a game, but it's changing the mindset. And I think Nirali will also agree with me that it has a very adverse psychological effect on a child.
Yes,
although
it desensitizes.
There are studies and surveys being done on that, even abroad, and I think we are all trying to see how far we can curtail this problem. Another problem is the addiction problem. So this self-harm is causing a huge worry, and I think what is important is you may immediately inform the social media platform so that they remove that content out if it's on social media. If it's on a website, you must immediately inform the registrar of that website and the hosting company of that website, so that the abusive nature of the content or the content which is illegal can be removed right away. And usually we send the legal notices out, because we have technical ways of checking these details, from various records online. And then we get the details and then we send them notices within 36 hours. That is the mandate in India. They have to remove that content out and must report it also to police. If it is self-harm, it is very, very serious matter.
Like what you're saying is so pertinent, like you're saying, but I feel what we are saying and where we are saying is more important, because today I feel parents are not playing their role of protesting and reporting, because they see something is happening, they will get them off. But the very fact that when you leave something like something which is actually causing this whole problem and this whole environment, if we each one don't live in that consciousness of actually saying, I have to remove this. I mean, it's my child today, it could be a sister tomorrow, it could be another child tomorrow. We don't clean up the environment and make sure that we're leaving the whole net space more clean. Like you're saying, if they're not reported, they won't stop. And
Shall I?
you might be able to stop your child from seeing it today, but another child will see it tomorrow, and that which leads to all the effects which we are seeing on children today, right? The psychological effects of stumbling on, like somebody else is mentioning out here, there's so many advertisements, games and movies that come on screen while they're working on a computer, and these links are not safe. So I would say it's all about reporting. It's all because you are actually breeding a ground which actually affects your children in a much deeper way. It's not about just that 2 minutes of watching that ad, that clip. It actually leaves a deeper imprint on and actually creates havoc on the way they are shaping up as human beings. Like when I started this whole work, I won't believe it. I was working with psychologists, Nirali. They said all ugliness and all violence rises from unhappiness. And unhappiness only comes when you have been traumatized in some format or the other. And this is actually as a breeding ground of, we are leaving a space which is breeding so many kind of symptoms here, which leave such big, deep imprints on children, which actually breeding a lot of unhappy children.
Yeah. So, you know, in our clinical practice also, whether I'm dealing with a child or whether I'm dealing with an adult, in cases when it is adult, 90% of the behavioral issues or psychological issues at a later point of age come from your childhood experiences. So, you know, having a beautiful childhood is very, very important. And children require only 3 things to have a lovely childhood. The first is love and care. The second is security. And the third, which we all feel they're just children, but they still need, is respect, self-respect and respect from others. So none of this, without this, no child is going to really, really have a problem-free childhood. What you go through your initial 14, 15 years of life is going to shape up your rest 40 years of your life. So investing the time now in a relationship with a child is far more important than in a gadget. And you know, like you said, that parents don't want to report, they fear reporting because of the process, because of whatever other reasons, or anonymity also. So let's understand that the moment you allow your children to be part of cyberspace, to be part of social media, you are dropping anonymity. Then it can't become subjective that no, only while reporting I want. Sorry, then don't allow them at all if you want to retain that kind of, because children also, when they write to us, every single complaint has a line saying we don't want to involve our parents. Can we do it without informing them? And the reason always is because they will not understand. They will cut off my social media, they will cut off my internet, they will take away my device. Is that a solution? Not really, because they will still access.
There's another thing that I feel, it's important, apart from what Nirali is sharing, that is of responsive parenting, because that's what we're all, we should be geared on to, because I'm also a parent and I understand what Nirali just shared on.
We all are, I guess.
And, respect. So I can totally relate to what she's saying, but I also very closely read the Convention on the Rights of the Child, and there the right of participation, if you're laying down house rules, and if you're expecting the child to, behave and understand those norms or respect those norms, it is important that you also listen to the child. Like I said, empathetic listening, because we sometimes, as parents, we set down rules thinking we know better because we are elder, we're older, and in experience we are more mature. But sometimes we miss out on the child's perspective also, because they're being brought up in a different world of gadgets and technology, which we may not have been so exposed to at our points of time. So we have to come to a balance. We can't take away the internet access from them. At one of the ICMEC Singapore's conference, I was discussing whether there is a need for giving them the internet access at all, or should we just completely take away gadgets from technology from children? And we strongly advocated there that you cannot do that anymore. I mean, in the present times and age, where international bodies are talking about child rights and participation of children, we need to lay down even house rules. I would say even ICT policy of schools, keeping the children's perspective in mind. So it's important to give them that respect, that they are heard, the right to be heard, although they may not be adults. But then I think it's important because after all, those rules are for their safety. And if they participate in it, there will be less resistance from them.
Great. I think those were great insights. I think, Shefali, have we covered most of the questions you have here?
I think we have. I had messaged you a few.
Yeah, we spoken about things stumbling onto people's nets and screens and how you have to report them. And there was somebody saying that how do you educate children about cyber safety without scaring them?
No, so of course we don't scare them. What we emphasize is on managing your digital footprints and your cyber hygiene. Internet is a very beautiful space. See, the workshops that I do, in fact, I'm doing one on this coming Sunday for teenagers and teens and tweens, basically on cyber safety. It's never about that, no, you have to stop using this. It's only from the point of view of making them aware, because if you've heard about it, you're cautious. That yes, I have heard, I have experienced something like when you're teaching children about fire, you don't make them burn their fingers. So same way, the idea is not to scare them. If it is scaring you, great, it works either ways, but that's not what it's meant for. It's about informing and educating them that yes, if you don't mind your digital footprints now, what you're using internet for today, if it's not meaningful, tomorrow it is going to cost you your dream university or your job. Because your entire footprint is it becomes your social personality, or it becomes your entire social life online. And I have actually got cases of children being rejected by university for this reason, that inappropriate social conduct. They are not coming to your house to check that. It's all from social media, because the child did not have any kind of, a positive or any vision, mission, any good project. His social media was all about fancy pictures with all those trends latest, the photo challenge and the old age challenge and etc. etc. The university actually wrote that I don't think that you're serious in life. So that's what we educate them. That's what cyber safety education is meant about. And of course, technically also we help them in understanding the certain settings, privacy that they should be maintaining, and that all is covered under hygiene. So that's what these cyber safety workshops are about.
So I also wanted to mention here, the personal data protection bill is important to highlight, because, the law is changing in India. And with this new bill, if it becomes an enactment, it will be keeping our children's data more secure, because none of these platforms will be able to actually take away more data than is necessary to give us service. So we are really looking forward to that. Plus, I was part of the discussions when the National Cybersecurity Coordinator conducted a special meeting to discuss the National Cybersecurity Policy, which we are in the process of updating. And there we kept children protection as an important agenda. I kind of voiced that concern because I'm working on the area. And I think we are expecting that National Cybersecurity Policy may actually incorporate child security there, which is going to be a huge landmark for India, because we really want this, aspect to be covered. In the last policy of 2013 does not have that as much. So that's important as well. And therefore, during the workshops, which I have interacted with children or parents, we have tried to explain them the changing ingredients, for example, of law, and how more secure the children will be, or how they can safeguard in terms of security. And rather than scaring them, no, that's not the idea, again, as Nirali also said, because after all, they are for awareness, and they are put in a way that, the children and teachers can absorb more, or parents can absorb more than actually scare them away. So that is the idea of giving them user-friendly tips on prevention, as well as keep them good information on how they can combat an issue if it ever arises. So that's the idea.
Great, guys. I think everybody out here is so passionate about this topic as much as I am. I'm so happy to be amongst my tribe. Talking about this whole new world, which I would love the parents here and the others at YFlow to understand that it is a very important space to traverse. It's not something which you can ignore. It has to be dealt with systematically. it has to be dealt with consciousness, because like we are saying, we are shaping the next generation. We are shaping how the world is shaping up through our children. So it's very important that each of us play our role in creating a more digitally civic space. Other than just city civic sense, we're talking about digital civic sense. Sebastian has given us insights on about how we can do it. Nirali, everybody has, and we are doing a really systematic school program just for that, so that we can really shape the next generation in the space of how you can create a world safer for children. Shefali, would you have any other questions? Anything you'd like to say here?
I think most of the questions have been covered, and you have, of course, asked all of them. There was one little question which got left out, was how, as parents, can we secretly probably monitor our kids' activities? Because, see, at the end of the day, we all know they're smarter than us. So even if they tell us, no, Mama, I'm not doing this, but things might be happening. So is there any way that, we can sort of have an app, a detector of how to...
Yes, we do have, but we very, very strongly discourage parents for resorting to that. It is all about investing in building trust with the child. For how long would you monitor? Tomorrow that child will be absolutely stunned with what you have done, though your intention is not bad. So until and unless, it's clinically mentioned that yes, that this child can be, self-harm to himself or herself, we won't really advise that, or even, encourage parents to get onto that. Rather make children more responsible. And at some point, we also have to let them experience. That's how they are going to grow up in life. How much can we control? So that's my perspective. But of course, softwares are available.
Softwares are available, absolutely. I think there is one software called Zone Alarm also, and I think Norton has some products. There are other products where even social media can be monitored. If there is any disturbing content which comes on social media to a child's account, that can immediately trigger, a message to the parent. Even that is possible. We are in today's times when CCTVs, have kind of become a norm. So in the houses, while that helps, but on the cyberspace, you really need that kind of a filtering mechanism or that kind of a reporting. So sometimes with the consent of the child also, those can be put in. And if you feel that there will be a resistance and there is a real need for you to monitor, then Zone Alarm and other such softwares, which also give you updates on Facebook and other social media, what is happening, is something that you can adopt. Maybe that's something possible.
Thank you.
I think Nirali needs to leave because
yes, I have another call lined up.
But thank you
I
so
think
much.
now
my pleasure.
Need to get into the strategies part for protection. That's what you're
doing. Sebastian has certain strategies which you can, which parents can follow for protecting themselves as a kind of a wrap up.
Maybe I'll follow it up with a slide to make it very, very easy and systematic. And I'm sure you'll be taking a lot of some good takeaways from this. Some of these points have already been covered by my fellow panelists in one or other form. So one of the most important thing about the important strategy in your home computer is a licensed software.
Yeah.
We, many of us, when I say we, many of us tend to use a pirated software, whereas the actual licensed software will not be costing, maybe a Windows home version will not be costing more than some 3,000 rupees or so. And the beauty of the licensed software is that it also provides you an antivirus, firewall, and you can get an update, patches, etc. regularly. Only you need to just connect it to the internet. That's the first part. Number two is password policy. If I ask anyone, like, sorry, somehow I missed it. Let me see where that slide has come. Yeah. One of the things I just want to tell about is the password policy. If I ask anyone, like, what is a characteristic of a good password? I know almost everyone will say it should be 10 to 12 characters, letters, that is normal and capital, then numerals and special characters. And this password should not be there in any literal or name dictionary. It should not be related to your biography. It should not be associated with you in any way. These are all fine. Then comes, how will I remember it, such a pattern? So I have one small example to tell you, like how to make a strong password. Now, think that this is the question asked to me by one of you. What is your name? Where do you live? And what are you doing for a living? I just may be answering this. I am Sebastian Edeseri. I live in Kochi. I work with Deloitte for the past 12 years. What I'm now going to do, this is a sample of the thing, how you can make a strong password. I'm going to take the first characters of all the words in this. So I took it, I from I am Sebastian, A, S, E from Sebastian Edeseri, then full stop. So, and it comes, I live in Kochi and I work Deloitte for the past 12 years. So I have taken the first one of that 12. Now, if you ask me, is there a special character in this? Yes, there are some special characters like full stop. But you make it strong, you do this thing like this way. Like the second and third character, I have changed it with @ and S. And still I can say, I am Sebastian Edeseri, full stop. I live in Kochi, full stop. I work with Deloitte for the past 12 years or 10 years, 1 year, whatever it may be. Now this password is how many characters if you see? It's more than 20 characters. And it has a capital, small, special characters, everything is there and it is very easy to remember. And I will tell you, the first time when I demonstrated this was in a convent school in Lucknow, and one girl child came with a 128 character password. Then I asked her, how did you develop it? Because she understood the logic very quickly. She is from a very pious family of Hindu family. And one of the prayers that she every day used to have, and she has by then had by hearted, that is a Hanuman Chalisa. So she used to take the first characters of that Hanuman Chalisa. So then I used to tell, if you are not a Hindu, maybe there is an equivalent prayer somewhere else. Or if you don't believe in any religion, maybe you would love some songs, or even something like movies like Sholay, Are O Khaliya, Kitne Goli Hai. So all these things, like can be super basis for your strong password. You can never forget it. Maybe you make it 2, 3. And then there is a question that comes after 3 months, some banks ask to change this password. So what I normally do is maybe at the beginning or at the end, I replace with some numbers like 1, 2, 3, 4, things like that. So that you are continuing to be there only and remain with a very strong password. So maybe this is one strategy that is going to save you a lot, because many cases in hacking or any cyber related security incident, it is associated with you are unable to make a strong password. And another research study say that about 82% of the people in the world, they use their biographical information for a password. Something like their date of birth, the date of marriage, name of children, the registration number of the car, or the first school you studied, things like that. So all these are available in somewhere or the other place, and it becomes very difficult. So make a strong password. Then comes wireless routers. She mentioned about, Karnika had mentioned about. One of the most important thing that you need to do is change the default password of these wireless routers. By default, wireless routers come with a user ID as admin ADMIN and password also again ADMIN. And it becomes very easy to get into that and then do whatever hacking, etc. you want. I have many case studies, but for want of time, I am not going to mention here now. And there is a process called MAC binding within that. That means even if your password is lost or leaked, if you configure your wireless routers by which it can be connected only to certain MAC numbers. MAC numbers mean that are the unique numbers of your computer, and equivalent numbers is IMEI numbers of your mobile, etc. So even if password got leaked, it will not get connected to any other device, but exclusively to the unique MAC number or IMEI number that you have given. Then again, connecting with children. I go for a lot of program in the schools. And whenever I go to school, one of the questions that I ask maybe some of the children sitting in front is like, Beta, what is your email ID? So that I will say, sania2012@gmail.com. So 3 things is already revealed. Sania means it's a girl child. And 2012 is the year she is born. And she is a girl child. So name, sex, and year of birth is already gone. And it becomes very easy for a good researcher to find out what other details she belongs to. So I tell the parents, maybe, create some funny email IDs like butterscotch 2050 or some number at yahoo.com or at gmail.com or peanut at gmail.com. So what are the advantages of these? From the email ID, no other person will be able to guess what could be the actual name of this child or the year of birth or sex, etc. Then tell the children that anything getting in this world now free, nothing is free in this world. If somebody is giving you anything free, he might have a plan for making, ensuring that he makes much more out of that. So download only from trustworthy sources. Don't go for anything free. It could be always dangerous. And when you get into, your identity documents, these days it is being a digital world. Don't send a document on scan and send it. There are some ways of putting annotation on the scan document, like this document is handed over to so-and-so person on so-and-so date for so-and-so purpose, etc. And you yourself sign it. Then such documents are very difficult to be abused. I am telling from the background of many of my CBI investigation, like whenever a bomb incident happens in India, straight away police gets into a call with 10 minutes before how many calls came from our neighboring country or how many calls have gone to that neighboring country, etc. And a lot of people are picked up just because of the identity papers they have submitted for taking that say phone connection. We just distribute our identities. We don't even take care of how much our identity paper should be handled. I even say if I have multiple identity cards, like say for example an electoral identity card, normally it is valid for years together, 15 years, 20 years, 30 years in some cases and all. And if I have multiple ID cards, the ID card that is going to expire maybe next year, that's the one I'll be using. I will not be using that ID card which is going to be expiring after so many years. Then this could be a big challenge for many people when I say no or minimal app on the smartphone. Because I don't know, even Karnika was mentioning it, like how many of you have ever read terms and conditions of when you install a smart app on your smartphone? You think of if Ola and Uber can come to you with an accuracy of plus minus 1 meter, then any other app also can have that much of capability. It can literally track you and hunt you down.
Mr. Sebastian, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think Karnika needs to leave also for another.
Yeah, please.
I'm so sorry.
Karnika, we'll catch up.
Yes.
Thank you so much. I think it's been a pleasure to be here with YFLO Calcutta hosting this, and Leena and all the panelists, Sebastian, Nirali, we all heard from, and Shefali, thank you so much for.
Thank you, Karnika. If we can just wait 1 minute, I would just like to invite my senior vice chair, Varsha Wadhwa, to give us the vote of thanks, please. Varsha, are you here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes. We can't see you though.
Sebastian, if you have a slide, I can share it with everybody if you share it with me.
Yeah.
Protection. It seems we've overrun the time. So we'll actually get the whole points about how to keep the children safe.
Yes, I would post that with the social media.
Yeah. So for some reason my video isn't working. It's been a real invigorating and informative session to have such experts like you all, Karnika, Nirali, Sebastian, and of course Leena, to wonderfully moderate the session to help us with a deeper understanding of the cyber world and making us aware of the safety measures to take in the virtual world. Thank you so much for joining in today. We would also like to thank our sponsors, gift partner Tribe by Amrapali and Studio 13, design partner Design Pinata, and Media Sanmarg. Thank you so much for tuning in today.
A pleasure. Thank you so much for this thing. I'm sorry we didn't hear everything about Sebastian had to say. But
I know, I'm really sorry. I think everyone's just back to back on their virtual calls and meetings.
Karnika, thank you so much for coming and joining us here at this. It is quite a rush organizing this whole panel.
But it's a wonderful interaction that we have had, and we look forward to many more such interactions with you.
Yes,
and working with you in this space. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Karnika. Sebastian, you will have to share the slides.
It will take only 2 more minutes. Just to, I think,
Then we can start. Yeah, we can do it. Yeah.
Okay, then just allow me to share the screen.
Right.
Yeah, I'll just do that. I think you can now.
Yeah.
Okay, I can. So we are getting to the last 2-3 points, which I'll
Right.
quickly cover.
This is good. Yeah.
Then do not post pictures or videos of your children on the net. And something about default settings. Now, when anyone is getting into an account, by default, almost everything is open. And it should be made so strong, no? Like it should be shareable, non-shareable, even your own phone settings. Is it with a PIN or password protection, etc. Then restrict apps that are needed to be need your access to photos, calendar, things. And last but two important points, that last ones, reset password and security questions. Many of you, when you want to retrieve your account, some of the things are based on security questions. And maybe like one of the security question is, what is the maiden name, what you call the maiden name of your mother? Or which is the first school that you had? So for the same thing, say for example, what is the name of your mother? I normally put yellow, blue, things like that. You need not to give the real name, because many people will know the real name of your mother, or what the color you like, maybe hippopotamus or something like that. So, but you should know what you have put. Then same way, we had a very brief session about social profiling. She touched up, and there have been so many incidents now. Corporates have made it a business. Like if somebody is appearing for a job interview, just before that, a person, what he has been doing for last 10 years on the internet, using a crawling tool, everything that is posted by a person is picked up and it is put to the company in the form of a report, maybe something like 20-30 pages. And it will be doing all emotional, religious, political, you tell any analysis, it's all done and it is given. So tell your children that what you're going to post now is going to haunt you later in your life.
Let me interrupt you here. Wasn't the government also using this, especially the income tax department, to see who's doing what on thanks to their social pages?
Even L&T has grabbed $100 million contract 2 years ago just to tell you whether you are actually paying or not paying the income tax appropriately.
Yeah.
Okay, so think of it like they are able to track you by using the photographs you have pasted, or from the place where you are accessed the internet, etc. So I think with that, I am fine to close it.
Oh, that was not much. Sorry, I thought there was more. No, these are such important insights, Sebastian. We're very, very, like even this thing about resetting and security questions. Usually when they ask us middle name, we put a middle name.
Yeah.
They'll ask us saying, we think, oh, you have to put that for some
Because
reason.
if I am one of your good friends, normally crime is done by some of your good friends also at times. Okay, so that you can control by ensuring that you don't put such things.
Very, very, I mean, it just turns the whole thing upside down. No? We are like so linear in our thoughts. It's so important to expand our whole thought process.
And it's more like we feel we know everything, but seeing this, I think it's like we need to know this.
Yeah. I'm so glad, Shefali, that you did this, and I hope that the insights which have come here are great, and you can share it with everybody, because I truly believe that we parents really need to, or mothers, the hand that rocks the cradle rules the world. That's my motto, and I think parents, mothers really need to do their bit, you know.
True. Thank you so much, Leena, and thank you, Mr. Sebastian. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sebastian, for being here. I'm so happy we finally did the first one. There are more to come.
Yeah, we can. So, and the other sessions, maybe it will be more of a case study like thing that we will do. So
yes, more case study. Yes. Okay,
yes.
Sebastian.
Okay, thank you and good
Thank
day.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Shefali. Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Bye-bye.